Jamie Pollard, one of the first, even well before the latest realignment with the conference, just back from Dublin, Ireland. He joins us on 365 Sports. So I can't even imagine, are you completely worn out, or is there an exhilaration that will feed you for a couple of days until you pass out?
Well, I don't know if I'm worn out, but I will just say this. The week over there in Dublin was the neatest experience I've ever had professionally. It was absolutely amazing and almost surreal. I feel really bad for my friends at K-State, especially Gene Taylor, because I think up till the end of the game, he would have had the exact same comments. And I think deep down he would still say it was, although, one of us had to go home with a loss. But yeah, we need to turn the page because we got a game Saturday and we have, 11 more games to play.
What did this mean as a showcase for the Big 12, for your two schools, to give up a rivalry game, on one of your campuses, to go and do that? There's risk involved or whatever, but it seems like it was a kind of a home run all the way around.
Well, let's start with just thanks to Gene Taylor and Coach Kleiman, because they were the ones that gave up the home game. And I'm sure there's maybe a little regret there now. And I'm sure, all the armchair quarterbacks at K-State will be second guessing that decision. For us, not having to go to Manhattan in week 11, that was a big win right off the bat, whether we won the game or we didn't. But I will say this, the experience over there, I don't even know what to liken it to, because you can't say bowl game because it was so much greater than a bowl game. To be a sold-out stadium, the intensity during that game, how loud it was, the fact that, whoever won that game was going to have a leg up to start the Big 12 season. Mm-hmm. So it was like a playoff game. It really was. And, I give them credit, though, because, we only had 6 home games this year, so we couldn't do that. They had 7, and they were willing to give one of them up to go back to 6. So kudos to Gene Taylor and Coach Kleiman.
Jamie, it seems like you guys are in a really good groove as far as an athletic department, but also as a football program. The success of last year to start off the year this way, there's obviously been that consistency with Coach Campbell no matter what the offseason brings every year, but his ability to promote from within, it seems like there's a very strong foundation that's obvious in Ames, but maybe not obvious enough to a lot of people out there how strong that foundation is.
Well, you're right on. He's created a culture that is second to none. And, I just even think leading into that game, when I asked him really deep down, what did he think? And, he would tell you that he really didn't know what was going to happen on Saturday because, you really don't know what K-State had. You really don't know what we have. You like to think you do, but until you start hitting somebody else on the other side that's different than your team, you don't really know. And he was more worried about week 2 and week 3 because the history of this game has been people have stumbled coming out of it. But what he did say is he said, what we have to trust for the game on Saturday is that our culture is strong enough that our kids will be tough enough to weather whatever happens. And when I think about whatever happens, we got rain, there were fumbles, there was turnovers, there was just the first half was a game of 2 teams that you could clearly see hadn't played a game yet this year. And which team was stronger through that? And our culture, I think, really showed up in the second half, especially the fourth quarter.
Jamie, can you try to describe the amount, the tonnage of everything being sent and those involved in moving and then returning and being there where you haven't been, all of that? Because I think, the game, we're going to get into the game even more, but the fact that so much had to be moved, flown, chart, all of that. What was that like, that just overall amount of itinerary, et cetera?
Well, I'd break it into 3 groups. There's the group of, all the fans. We sold 11,000 tickets. Half that stadium was full. All those people had to get there by flights. It's not like, well, I'm going to just get in the car and drive down to the game. All those people had to be moved over there. And, kudos, big shout out to John Anthony and his team at, Anthony Travel and On Location. because of all those charters, the buses, getting everybody wherever they need to get to, all the events. So that was one big entourage. Then you had the band and spirit squad, being able to get that group of people there with their instruments and get them over there and have buses lined up to move them in and around Ireland. And then you had your team, and then the team had kind of two subsets, which was, well, how are we going to get the players there? And, how are we dealing with just the time change and sleep? But then you had all the equipment, and the equipment went early by ship in cargo bays. So, staging that out, like the amount of food we sent over, the Gatorade we sent over ahead of time, figuring out we're at home the next two games. So it was pretty much all our road gear that went over, other than shoulder pads, because shoulder pads are, the one item that they wear consistently throughout the year. They don't have second set. So the players all had to bring those shoulder pads back with them on the airplane. But, the helmet we wore at that game won't be the helmet we're wearing Saturday, because it won't be back in time. So all that logistics had to be planned out. And, it took a team. It was a team effort from everybody in this department that embraced it.
Yeah, you can't trust that Irish Gatorade. It's got to be spiked, Jamie. I don't blame you guys for doing that. It's probably got a little nip in it all the way down the line. You talked about Coach Campbell and his culture. How much does it mean to Iowa State? Because in the years before you were athletic director, sometimes I think coaches saw this as a stepping stone job, and they didn't really make it their program. Now, coaching is the most fluid profession maybe on planet Earth, so nobody knows what the future holds. But it is, to me, from the outside looking at somebody like Matt Campbell, who wants to make this his program, like Bobby Bowden made Florida State his program, and Bear Bryant and all that, that has got to be a huge deal for you guys to be able to project out into the future how you want to run things.
Well, I'll go back 20 years ago and, coming in as the AD and having a blueprint that really was what we had done at Wisconsin. And most people generationally don't remember what I remember as a kid. Wisconsin was horrible. And, Pat Richter built a culture at Wisconsin that created an environment that allowed, when he found a coach that was willing to stay, Barry Alvarez, that the culture grew with what Coach Alvarez wanted to do with that program. Coach Alvarez's vision was Bob Devaney, be a coach and then become the AD. And so Coach Alvarez got to do that entire time. And in essence, that's the same thing I kind of felt like we were going to build at Iowa State. I didn't know who that coach was going to be at that time, but, it took us a couple times to find it. But we found Matt Campbell, and when we found him 10 years ago, we had 10 years of groundwork that we had put in to put Iowa State in a position that if you got a coach like Coach Campbell that really wanted to build his program at one place, you were putting the tools in place, putting the background in place that he would be able to do that. I liken it a lot to, you said Bobby Bowden, but I think of Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great example, or what Bill Schneider did at K-State. That's what Coach Campbell's doing here, but it's a dance, and it can only happen if the foundation is there. Coach Campbell came here with what's inside his heart, what's inside his being is he wasn't a coach that was going to jump around. He wanted to be at a place that he could build something incredibly special. But he can't do that if we don't have the foundation in place for him to do that. And the first 10 years, we spent a lot of time putting that foundation in place.
Jamie, I know there's been a lot of talk about the continuing part of this rivalry and not having any off years. I saw Brett Yormark, of course, made some comments on it as well. What is the reasoning, in your opinion, why this can't be every year in a protected rivalry?
Well, it's not that it can't be. But the fact of the matter is it can't just be what K-State and Iowa State want. You're in a conference with 14 other members. And if you're going to let teams have rivalries and protect them, then it's got to be equal. The day you don't is the day people start to say it's an unfair schedule because, well, that team gets to play those two teams every year, and that's an easier schedule. And so what was decided by the ADs is there would be one game that was protected. And K-State's one game is KU. I get that. It doesn't mean we don't respect that rivalry. I would love to play them every year. But the fact of the matter is, to do that, you've got to get 14 other schools to agree that there's going to have to be more than one game protected. And that really wasn't the way of the room. The room wasn't thinking that when this was decided. And so we're going to play K-State 3 out of every 4 years. And I think that's probably more a reflection just of the major leagues now being 16 teams, not being 10, not being 8. And there's going to be some casualties to that. And it's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. Doesn't mean it will stay like that forever. But the first pass of the 4-year cycle, the rest of the ADs weren't on board to say there's going to be 3 games that are protected. Right. They voted to have 1 game protected.
I'll ask you a scheduling question here. Did you have any thoughts on the news last week? The SEC is going to 9. Looks like the ACC might go to 9. I know we don't want to get deep into playoff talk on the start of the regular season, but that just was a notable story from last week. So did that catch your attention at all? Or were you too busy having a great time in Ireland?
Well, both. But yeah, I did notice it, and I think it's a great step in the right direction, because I think that one of my beefs with just our industry is, we want to run it like a professional league like the NFL, but we're not set up that way. We've got 4 commissioners. We don't have 1. And we have 4 sets of scheduling parameters, not 1. And so moving the SEC and hopefully the ACC to 9 games like the Big 10 and the Big 12, I think starts to get things more normalized. And I think that's a healthy thing for college football.
You mentioned that. How long do you think that there is? I think because we talked to a lot of ADs, that there's sentiment for a lot more centralizing than there is now, to have that uniformity so that we're not every year having these things. But then when it gets to the next level, there maybe is not as much push for that. Do you feel like the ADs are starting to maybe come together and feel similar about all that?
Well, I do, but it's an evolution. It's not going to happen overnight. I wish it would have happened a long time ago, because it might have prevented some of the challenges we're facing today, but it didn't. And so you can only, move forward. But I do feel that there is a belief that that's what's in the best interest of college football. And I hope we can get there. It's a challenge, though, because, the NFL is 32 teams. I think it is 32. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it is.
It's 32 for a reason. It's not 64. It's 32 for a reason, because they understand that to be able to have all 32 be healthy, you can't have there be 64. It doesn't work. And so we're trying to overlay that model in college football right now. And that's part of one of the challenges, and then you add to it, the Kansas City Chiefs aren't also paying for a basketball team and a women's basketball team and a baseball team and a softball team. They're paying for the Kansas City Chiefs. So our industry is different, and just this quick overlay, it doesn't happen overnight.
Did you play golf, or is that a dumb question, in Ireland?
I did. My wife and I went early, and we played 3 rounds of golf, and it was absolutely awesome.
Had you ever played like in Scotland or England or ever in that area, or was that the first time?
That was my first time, and I was able to play Doonbeg, I played Ballybunion, and I played the K Club. And, the first 2 are links, and those were really special, but the K Club was awesome because the Irish Open is there this week, and it was all set up for that. All the bleachers were set up, the scoreboards were all set up, and the rough, unfortunately, was really long, but I thought that was really neat to get to play that course. I'm surprised they let my game go on that course, because I probably took out a little bit of turf.
Jamie, when it comes to, distribution nowadays, there's just so much going on in the greater landscape and all of that. But one of the moves the Big 12 made a while back was the sub-licensing deal with Turner Sports. And I've already noticed that Turner's putting out tweets last week. They're promoting the broadcast. They've got teams. They're like, hey, here's going to be calling the games. It just seems like they're very invested and already kind of getting in the mode of promoting the Big 12. What do you think of this partnership? And, how excited are you to see what Turner's maybe already doing with trying to just promote the league and get it out to as many people as possible?
Well, it's great, but let me back up and say, this is an area where Commissioner Yormark deserves a ton of credit, and he was the one that just believes that in order to position us best for the next round of television, that we've got to get more competition in the marketplace. And the best way to do that is to get some of the other distributors some product before we get to 2031-32. So Turner has come on for football and basketball, but for football, we'll have 3 entities that'll be distributing our football games this year: Fox, ESPN families, and the Turner families. But then in basketball, you've seen it even further. We've added CBS and we've also added NBC. And so basketball, you're going to need a scorecard to know where you can find our games. But what it's doing is it's getting our events, our games into more distribution points, so that when we get to 31-32, hopefully there'll be more competition for it besides just being, it's ESPN and Fox. So Turner has embraced it. They've jumped in and done some great promo work with it, and it's only going to get better because they're going to do a lot of that as we lead into basketball as well.
Do you feel, Jamie, and thanks for your time, I know you got to go. Do you feel a lot of what Craig and Paula brought up, but do you feel better about the near future of college athletics when it comes to the FBS or the Power 4 schools? And that there's a little bit more, it was going too fast, and now some people have said, hey, wait a minute, and that everybody's listening to everybody, or is there still the concern there will be this next super move?
Well, I think there's always concern, and part of the concern is based on, in recent history, whenever major conferences have had their television rights come up, that we've seen splintering. And so, we've got the Big 10 and the Big 12 in 2031-32, and and then you've got the ACC that rewrote their agreements with their teams that in 2031-32, there's, a look-in element where somebody can buy out. So, you do have that in the back of your head. And then on top of it, we add in the House Hubbard settlement and, a lot of other, the transfer portal and all of these other issues that have kind of made it, a tough sledding right now. And I liken it a little bit to, musical chairs, that all of us, want to have a chair when the music stops. And so you got to stay in the game, even though it might be painful here in the short term, trying to figure out how to stay in the game. You've got to stay in it. That being said, I do believe that, individually, if you were to just talk to any one of the ADs in any one of the leagues, nobody wants to destroy anybody else. I think we all really want what's good for the best for the sport. But, it's tough out there, and we got to find our way through all this. And I'm hopeful. What I do know is this: control what you can control. And so my number one job is to do everything possible to control what happens at Iowa State. My second job is to make sure I do my part to help the Big 12 be as healthy as it can be. And then my third job is to try to figure out how to, keep our industry afloat. And so right now I feel really good about where we are at Iowa State, and I feel really good at where we are in the Big 12. I've never felt as close to my colleagues in the Big 12 that we're all in it and trying to figure this out together. And I don't feel like somebody is there, but really when they leave the room, they're trying to leave the group, like we've had for years. And so that feels really good. And we have a commissioner that is, very innovative, and he's not afraid to throw mud up at the wall. We don't always agree, both personally, and he and I know that, but at the same time, I appreciate him doing that because that's what we need.
Yeah, I bet there was a couple of extra beams up, I guess, when you got back over at Sci-Town, right? That's underway. I know that's a long way down the road, but I had an Iowa State fan ask me about that, and I know you're proud of it, as are those involved in that project. We appreciate it. Get some sleep, jet lag or whatever, but a win sure makes all that a lot easier.
Well, thank you guys. I always love coming on your show. You guys are great. appreciate everything you do to promote not only the Big 12, but also your Baylor Bears.
Thank you very much.
right.
Iowa State, AD Jamie Pollard with us. Thanks to Nick Jost, great friend of ours that we've known forever.